Welcome to When Work Works, the podcast that helps leaders navigate the fast-changing world of work. My name is Julie Develin, and today we're diving into a topic that feels more relevant than ever, and that is resilience. Not just a personal quality, but as a strategic advantage for organizations. I could not be more excited with my guest joining me today, and that's Sam Simmons. We're going to talk today about what HR leaders can learn from sports, how to build resilience in the DNA of a team, and why it's one of the most important capabilities for the future of work. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Julie. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. Sam, this podcast is called When Work Works, so we ask everyone, gonna ask you, can you fill in the blank for me? Work works when?
Work works when there's clarity, connection, and community.
I love it. Clarity, connection, and community. Again, another mic drop. All of my guests have fantastic answers, and I want to package them all together and say, this is how work works. Make it work, right? All right. So, Sam, tell us a little bit about your history, how you got into HR, that kind of thing.
I was previously at the San Antonio Spurs as the head of HR for them and their sports and entertainment properties. And then before that, I was in tech and Wayfair and HubSpot in different people roles. HR is such a transferable skill because people skills are necessary everywhere.
Did you intend to be in HR?
No, I did not.
I love to ask that question because every time I ask that question to my audiences, I ask, how many of you got into HR by accident?
Yeah.
Most of the room raises their hand. How did you get into HR?
I went to college to study broadcast journalism because I wanted to be an NBA courtside reporter.
Okay.
I wanted to be one of those people who was standing in between a coach and getting to the locker room at halftime.
Okay.
And I did an internship and I talked to a bunch of career counselors before I graduated. And I just got the sense that the culture of some of the newsrooms was going to be a little different for me. And then also just where I'd need to start from a production perspective. So I had a great teacher who was like, hey, use your transferable skills and the fact that you're already working in higher ed, figure out what you want to do. And so I used that to get into college athletics and facilities management. Went on undergraduate admissions and working with young aspiring college students and their parents. And then from there into nonprofit, where I was recruiting people from different backgrounds into back office roles and K through 12 education, mostly focused on data analyst roles. And that's what then led me to executive search and then building my career, opening the door through recruiting to HR.
Wow, that is quite
It was
the
not
path.
linear.
No,
it was not.
But it never is, right? It never is. And look at you today. I just think people find that so interesting. I know I do. Your breadth and knowledge of experience really lends itself to this topic that we're talking to today because you have a lot of experience with resilience. In sports, it's very volatile. Well, in life, it's very volatile, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you, when it comes to resilience and how you think about resilience in a people and culture context, how do you define it?
I think resilience is all about optimizing over time. You know, one of the things that's most certain right now is change.
Mm-hmm.
So a resilient culture, a resilient workforce is going to endure a lot of change a lot more thoughtfully. See it as an opportunity to innovate and also an opportunity to learn. And being a learning organization is critical. You come up against the limits of your control every day, whether it's with the people you're managing or just the external factors from the economy to the state of society, all of that. So you got to be really focused on that short list of things you can influence as an organization while being able to pivot, right? Always flexible with your methods, even if you're solidly focused on a goal. So I think a resilient organization is critical right now.
Are there any moments you can share throughout your career or with the LPGA that really crystallized what this concept of resilience means to you?
Oh my gosh. Every year I've been working.
Yeah.
I think that resilience often comes in those moments of adversity. It's like a great sports analogy, right? You're going to be tested. And so you have to make choices. And sometimes you have a leader there who can walk the path with you. But oftentimes it is incumbent on you to use the tools you've been given to find your way out of it. So I've had the pleasure of being in different roles in my career that are like brand new to the organization, which is its own set of change management. management when you're the change management. It's like, I'm new, you've never met me before, you've never worked with anyone in this role. You're probably like, are you going to take things away from me? Right. And that's a whole set of things. And then I've also worked in roles that are different iterations of how they've been in the past, which is kind of what my current role is. And in all situations, I try to sort of start from a reasonable level of like, okay, what's a digestible first step? And I don't need to get to Z or see my way to Z up front. I just got to keep making choices every day and hopefully keep making progress every day and leading with my arms wide open, right? Ultimately, yeah, I'm going to encounter things I don't know, context I don't have, or people who aren't ready to trust me yet. But if you are consistent in what you do and your intentions and your strategy to back it up, people are going to be like, well, wow, she's going to keep showing up. Mm-hmm. She really is aiming to understand this place. She does understand the challenges. She wants to not just be here for the great moments of culture, but the hard moments too. So I trust that.
Yeah, I think so often also leaders, they think they understand what's going on in the individual roles, but they really have no idea, right? When leaders show up and they understand, what folks are doing on the front lines, as an example, that also helps to breed that trust. Again, we keep going back to that trust word, but it's also about communication. Can employees feel that? Can they feel when an organization is resilient? What does a resilient culture look like to you?
That's a really good question. I think resilience feels like when change inevitably happens at an organization, not an if, but when it does, you trust the change. You trust the process and the people doing it. You expect there to be thoughtful answers, and you see it as an opportunity to, one, get clarity, but also to potentially try something new. And I will say how an organization handles change is 100% emblematic of your culture and your values. So if you are a resilient culture, you're expecting some of those things and you trust the people around you and the organization to handle it thoughtfully, even if you don't know what it is.
Absolutely. The trust piece is absolutely something that I think is a foundation of all of this,
Yes.
right? To be a resilient organization, your employees need to trust that you as an organization have their best interest in mind. Also, the best interest of the business, too, because without the best interest of that, then the employees wouldn't be there, right? So
100%.
it's tough for HR professionals, especially, to kind of balance that sometimes. Any thoughts on that, the balance of those things?
I mean, listen, people priorities are business priorities. In order to do our jobs well, we have to be good, ongoing students of the business. So to me, it's all about integration. We might be focused on the employee experience or the internal systems that bring our staff together no matter where they are, where they work. For us, that's many places across the world and the country. But ultimately, the balance is making sure that these things speak to each other and they enable each other, right? They always say culture eats strategy. The whole reason that's true is because culture has such crazy transformative power. It's like, if you think about it as a house, what's in the walls, what's in the shutters, what's in the foundation, right? Some things that are harder to change. Strategy, you bring in different furniture to fill a room all the time. It can be beautiful, pristine. You can have the best slides, the most beautiful flywheel. But if the culture isn't right and the culture doesn't get right and it's not an enabler to that, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. It's funny too. We talk about resilience, and every time we talk about the word resilience, the word change is included.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess that makes sense. But at what point do we as leaders have to not fear change, but expect it as the only thing that's going to happen, right? We know there will be more changes, period,
Yes,
end of story,
yes.
because there hasn't ever been a time where there hasn't been change.
Yes.
I wonder how leaders can help to get their employees in that mindset.
The more you pour into that and being clear on your competencies, when you think about hiring, when you think about performance management, that's huge. To get people comfortable with expecting change, I mean, honestly, I would just start saying it. People love change, but they always discount how much change they actually do all the time. So then when you bring them a change that they didn't choose, there's always going to be a little bit of opposition because they didn't choose it for themselves. And you have to remind them they're capable, they're competent, patient. We're going to get through this, and I will hold your hand through, and maybe even as we jump off the cliff together, right? To your really good question, the way to get people used to change is talking about it. In the same way you think about something like feedback, the way to get over fearing it or dreading it or thinking of it as this thing that, you have to have a big meeting about, but to really normalize it is to keep talking about it.
Right.
And for leadership to share the real human part of making decisions on changes and why they're hard but still worthwhile. The more you normalize change and show people the tools to work through them and the competencies to support those tools, the better.
Another thing that becomes important is to include people in the change and not do change to people. People change all the time,
Yes.
but that's their choice. So when change is a choice, it becomes easier, I guess, to swallow. But when change is done to you, then there's oftentimes resistance, and that does not breed resilience. So I wonder if you have any strategies for leaders on that, how you can include employees in a change, even if the change is not something they have a choice about.
This is such a great question because oftentimes people will cut corners and steps in change management for that exact reason. They're like, well, they won't like it, so why tell them about it in the first place? It's about respect. There's all this research that shows that if you put time into sharing the process you went to get to a particular outcome or decision, people are more likely to trust the process and also trust the decision itself, even if they don't agree with it. But all too often, we're like, well, it just is what it is. Sometimes it's just like, I have so many other things to do. I want to be efficient. I'm stressed. And it's like, well, don't skip the important stuff, right? We want them to trust the process because the more they trust the process, knowing what we know about all the changes coming, the better this is, right? The easier we'll move through this the next time and we build up reps, right? It's like, I don't just trust the process now. I trust you. I trust your leadership. I trust the direction the organization is headed in. That's the ultimate, right?
Right. I may not trust the change itself, but I trust you being the champion of that change and telling me that it's all going to be okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And when it comes to the change piece of this, I find sometimes that organizations will try to manage the change after the change has happened.
Yes.
That's not the way to do it, right?
Change management is one of those things that we tend to underinvest in, kind of like resilience, right? Like calling it out. We just expect for people to know how to do it, but you're 100% right. A good process around change management always includes what's the argument against ourselves? What are we saying no to in order to say yes to this change? Because every decision has a set of no's and a set of yeses. And the best decisions that scale over time, you meet that head on. To your point, you're proactive in the people who are going to be your biggest detractors. You're prepared with your talking points. And you know that, like anything, it has to be a campaign. Mm-hmm. You can't solve it just through a town hall and an email. It would be lovely. But if you want it to endure and you don't want things to get lost in the telephone game of an organization and back to communication, like you said, you're going to put in the time to make a real strong plan. And then you're going to keep coming back to it and be like, hey, here's what I learned. Dan's doing it really well over here. And his team seems to get it. And here's the tips he shared. Here's the pointers he had for us for how to reach other people and get them on board.
Is there a conversation in there somewhere about silos within organizations and how important it is to build resilience by removing those silos? Do you have any tips on how to do that?
100%. Yeah. As you go through growth spurts as an organization, people sometimes will go like, well, I used to know everybody here. And now I don't. There's so many more people. There's a tendency to go, it's easier for me to solve for the things I'm working on by staying within my department. But at this point, everything is so inherently cross-functional. So just reminding people of the nature of work, right? That I made a joke the other day about how the group project you did in college is actually work in the real world forever. Nobody told you that?
Oh, wow. That's
true. I know it's a little dark, but it's like so true. Is like you have to get comfortable being dependent on people, which I think is a beautiful thing. I don't want to do everybody's job. In order to be able to embrace that, I have to go, here's as far as I can take it. Here's this other team, and we're going to work with them. Yes, that means we have to trust them to do their part, but there's no other way. Why resist what's inevitable?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's leaning on others to be experts in things that maybe you're not an expert in, but it's trusting them. And I think that a resilient organization, folks do trust each other. I remember when I was a VP of HR, I used to have meetings with teams that wouldn't normally get together. And every time I did that, I would come out of that meeting and say, wow, I really need to do this more. I think so often it's easy for us to just kind of put that by the wayside. That creates those silos, which does not breed resilience, right? Because that lack of transparency and trust just goes away. So when you think about an organization that is resilient, how do you think that affects their strategic advantage? Do you think that resilience has a big impact on business strategy overall?
I mean, resilience means like, what's your response time? What's your ability to let go of what was to embrace what could be? So that gap, that's all about resilience. There's been a lot of books written about Pixar and their culture around creativity. And I think one of the underpinnings, at least as I've read it, is this trust in each other to know like, hey, it might end differently than the way we started, but as long as we're aligned and we're communicating and we work as a team, it's going to be great. Right? We're solving for what's best for the project, not for what's best for Julie or what's best for Sam. When you have that level of trust, like I call it like we ride at dawn energy. Like, I don't know what we're doing, but I will have snacks packed, water ready to go. I'll bring a jacket. I'll bring swimming trunks, whatever you need in the morning, because I got you, you got me.
I love that. Just maybe some lessons for folks, right? Because you have so much experience. If an HR leader or a business leader is listening, what is something they could do immediately in order to start building a more resilient organization?
Something that's underrated is, you can only talk to your entire team every so often, right? You can't assemble them every month. I know some people do it more frequently, but when you do have that time, I do think it is valuable to almost do like a decision recap or something that brings people into, hey, we haven't talked in a while. We just pushed this press release out about X, or we just shared this decision. Let me replay some of the steps that we went through. I think there's a lot that helps from a resilience perspective when people go, I was just sitting here thinking you didn't even give this any thought. And actually, you're telling me there was so much work that went into this and you care so much about how it landed for our players, our partners, our fans, our staff, et cetera, right? So bringing people into those processes and a real culture of transparency does start to build the trust that you need in order to take people through change more often and to build some of that resiliency. And maybe through those stories, talk about the resiliency the group of people who led to said decision or outcome had to go. There was like, wow, it went left when we thought it would go right. And this was removed off the table, but we held strong. You'll have people like hanging on like, well, what happened? And it was like, well, it happened because you have the decision or outcome. But let me tell you how we got there. And let me tell you what I loved about what we did, right? And the group of people and why I love this team. And just reminding people you're capable too.
I think that's so important, right? Oftentimes people see the outcome of a change or the decision that was made, but they don't understand all the steps and the reasons behind it. So when we bring people into that conversation, it can become very, very powerful. So how do you think AI plays into all of this? It's not a conversation if we don't talk about AI.
We've got to talk about AI.
We have to talk about
Always
AI.
talking about artificial intelligence.
Can AI help us be more resilient, or do you think it stresses folks out?
Fundamentally, AI is a change, and it's going to keep evolving. I mean, it's changing so quickly already. AI is going to push our resilience in some ways because there's a lot of fear about it. There's so much talk about it. And then, to me, whenever there's that much talk, it's like, well, fundamentally, what problems are we trying to solve with it? Let's get direct and clear on that. And then let's talk about how we take some of the fear and apprehension out of experimenting with it.
Yes.
Because I think there's a lot of exciting things to do there, even if there's skills that people haven't developed yet, right? Because AI pushes you to be a good assessor of information and evaluator of information too. You can't just take what you get out, right?
Right.
Because in there, some of the stuff is like, well, that wasn't accurate.
Junk.
It doesn't talk. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that AI can help, and it's a great place to sort of test your resilience to see like, how are people going to pivot to this change and learning something new? And where are places where I can remind them that we've done this before? It was like, remember we went from Gmail to Outlook, or remember, and it was like, oh yeah, I blocked that out of my brain. And it was like, but we did it.
Right.
And we're totally fine. This is another opportunity to do the same thing and see what's possible with this technology.
Right. And change, again, happening all around us all the time. AI is just another piece of that. Wow. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. But before we leave each other here, I have some rapid fire questions that I like to ask.
Rapid fire.
Yeah, rapid fire. So brace yourself. But I know you're going to hit a hole in one. Ha ha ha. Okay.
The golf fun.
I had to do a golf fun. I couldn't make it through the whole show without doing at least one golf fun. You're going to put this right on the green. Okay. What was your first job?
I was a cashier at Albertsons.
And what did you learn most from that?
Patience, customer service. I learned how to memorize things really fast because there's so many produce codes and so many codes to the register. I learned how to balance a budget. I think the most important thing I learned is that everybody has a story.
Yeah.
What always fascinated me were the customers who preferred to go through my line, even though I was like, oh, well, why? And they was like, oh, because it's about me and the relationship. And now I know them and I've seen them with their spouse or with their kids or, so that was actually really powerful in that regard.
Very cool. What is something that listeners would be surprised to learn about you?
Oh, what's surprising about me? Tell me.
Didn't you mention one time you don't golf?
Oh, no, I don't. But I didn't play basketball either. And I worked at the San Antonio Spurs before this.
I know.
But I'm in the extreme sport of HR. So I do believe in sports. I just don't always have time.
Yeah.
I'm really good at putting, though.
There you go.
I'm great at putting.
There you go. Mini golf. Yeah. So, Sam, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experience. It's really clear that resilience isn't necessarily about bouncing back, but bouncing forward, right?
100%.
And for HR leaders and leaders in general, the ability to build teams and adapt and learn and stay connected through uncertainty, I think we can say that through our conversations today, it is absolutely a competitive advantage. So
100% agree.
So thank you. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to When Work Works. If you enjoyed today's episode, let us know by leaving a rating and a review. Until next time, keep building workplaces that work. Thanks again, Sam.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.